Yeah, okay, good. We're back. Okay, we're on our travels again. We've moored up, we've dropped the anchor. I'll let our guests today introduce themselves and tell us something about where they are right now. Over to you, Jane.
Thanks. I'm Jane Wilkinson. I'm actually at home. 2 years of lockdowns. Melbourne was the most locked down city in the world. Not a record we're proud of. So I spend most of my time here in my home office in an inner city suburb of Melbourne.
Nice.
Gentrified, well heeled, but used to be one of the roughest, most industrial parts of Melbourne.
Cool. And what do you do? Tell us more about what you do.
So I'm a Professor of Educational Leadership in the Faculty of Education at Monash University, and I'm also acting head of the School of Education, Culture and Society in our faculty.
Cool. Over to you, Natalia, the pirate.
Thank you. Hi, Jane. I wanted to ask you when and how did you first encounter practice theory?
Thanks, Natalia. So I was a doctoral student and I was looking at the experiences of women leaders in universities who were from different ethnic and class backgrounds. And I really wanted to make sense of their experiences at the micro level. And the more I read, the more I thought I was using kind of discourse analysis, and I thought it's not giving me the nitty gritty. And a name kept popping up, Bourdieu. And in the end, I said to my supervisor, this name keeps coming up. What do you reckon? And she said, absolutely. So I started to read Pierre Bourdieu, and it just spoke to me on so many levels. And so I became a Bourdieusian scholar. And I still love Bourdieu to this day, I have to say.
Can you tell us a little bit more in detail what attracted you to practice theory? Bourdieu, maybe broader.
Yeah. Look, I think it was very much around the way in which, I mean, I'm talking Bourdieu, but more generally, I think the way in which to make sense of the kinds of taken for granted day-to-day realities, that's the wrong word to use, but practices that people kind of naturalize and seem to take for granted. But in fact, I know that there's nothing taken for granted about why people behave in the way they do. And it's not, for me, psychological explanations were never helpful. I'm much more a sociologist, but I just loved how practice theory really kind of engaged with the day-to-day and demystified it in really helpful and useful ways for me to understand why things happened in particular sorts of ways, how to make sense of that, and also then how maybe to bring about change.
Mm-hmm. And currently, what practice theoretical ideas are you working with or on?
Yeah, so I've spent the last 12 months or 18 months, 2 years, kind of immersing myself in reading about emotions and various practice theories. And for my sins, I wrote a book where a major chapter was really kind of and really trying to understand how to bring emotions and practice theory together. It's not a big topic, is it? Huge project. So I basically wrote this literature review to get my head around how practice theories were engaging with, or not, as the case might be, around emotions. And so my area, or the theory that I work most with now, is practice architectures theory. And my critique has always been, but what about emotions? Where are emotions? Where's the body? And so that sent me on this journey, Natalia, to look more intensely and deeply at those questions.
Fascinating. And could you tell us more about theory of practice architectures? Maybe our viewers are not familiar with this trend of practice theory.
Yeah. So it's a theory that was developed in Stephen Kemmis, who was at Charles Sturt University in Australia with me. I started there when I was a PhD student, and Stephen came along, and people may know Stephen as the kind of guru of action research. That might be the person that where they're most familiar with him. But anyway, he wanted to have a conversation about practice, and he invited all of us, and a number of us went along, and that's where we began a conversation around practice and practice theories. And really, out of that those series of conversations came, I think, Stephen's notion of practice architectures. It's not like it jumped fully fledged out of his head. He's very much a Habermasian, and I think he was bringing in Habermasian ideas into play. But this practice theory came about through probably 6 years of us sitting and talking, and him talking about a bit about Habermas, but also, yeah, I mean, it's kind of been a fascinating journey to watch how this theory has evolved. And so in 2014, we wrote a book about, which really tried to kind of, in a sense, nail practice architectures theory, and it was based on a 3-year large research grant that we had got from the government that was looking at the area of education, educational leadership and change, and trying to theorise it through this sort of developing theoretical lens. So that was kind of the evolution, if you like, and we've taken it on ever since.
Thank you. Elizabeth, now your turn.
So I'm pretending to be some kind of anthropologist interested in tribes and, you know, groups and so on. But before I fall into that role, I'd like to know a little bit more about what you concluded about emotions and practice theory.
A few things. I was actually surprised at the, I won't say the lack of engagement, but I thought there would have been more dialogue between emotions and practice theory. And of course, practice theory is such a broad umbrella term. You know, you could certainly go back to the second generation practice theorists, and I talk about Bourdieu because he's the one I'm very familiar with. And, you know, he does engage with emotions, and he talks about bodily hexis and how the body weeps. So there is sort of a kind of a gesturing towards emotions, at least in Bourdieuian terms. But when I was reading more contemporary stuff around practice theorists, so I did particularly look at Ted Schatzky's work, and I mean, again, I think there is some engagement with emotions there, but it was probably less so than I thought. And I'll just put it out there, it felt a little bit old-fashioned. I kind of thought, but am I missing something here? Is there, maybe it's all here and I just haven't quite seen it. So I'm not saying that I read everything, and I'm not saying I necessarily read it as deeply as perhaps I should have, Elizabeth, but it's a conversation I'd really like to have with the people in our practice, you know, circle, so to speak.
I mean, the thing is, I guess there's a kind of tradition of associating emotions with individuals, which practice theory obviously doesn't. And so the question would be, it's not so much are emotions there or not, but rather how are emotions conceptualized? So where do you stand on that?
How are emotions conceptualized when it comes to practice theory? I mean, I was really taken, I think, with Reckwit's work and his point around how I think emotions are kind of carried, if you like, so to speak, in practices. I think how that's then understood, I think, is, you know, so really kind of reconfiguring practices. Sorry, I'm looking up just because I'm trying to get back to thinking about something that I read very intensely about 12 months ago. But reconfiguring practices as something that, as you say, is not an individual, is not a product of an individual, but is actually something that is kind of is like a social contract, if you like, in terms of how things play out in the everyday world. And so I think that sort of notion of how emotions might be carried through the various practices. And I mean, we would talk about the kinds of arrangements, if you like, you know, material, economic, social, culturally discursive and social political arrangements, that there are particular kinds of what's the word, implications in terms of emotionality that are there. So, I mean, I think that was probably the thing that stood out for me. The other thing I'll just comment on very briefly, because I know it's only 10 minutes, is just that I was also really taken with some of Sylvia Garati's work around this. And she did a really lovely article where she talked about the notion of the critical incident and how that helps to kind of bring to the fore these kinds of intensified these practices that have particular kinds of emotional intensities attuned to them. So I think that notion of Reckwitz, I go back to Reckwitz, he talks about the attunement of practices. There's a particular kind of attunement, if you like, associated with certain practices or ways of carrying out in the world. So they were some of the sort of big ticket items, if you like, that I wrote about.
Okay, now I'm going to put my hat on properly and ask you, yeah, what kind of tribe are you part of, or who do you talk with about practice theory, or are you completely on your own in your home office?
No, not at all. So as a result of the kind of work that we've been doing around practice architecture theory, but I'm part of what's called a Pedagogy, Education and Praxis International Research Network, and our colleagues are mainly in Australia and the Scandinavian countries. So we have a lot of links with people in Norway, in Finland, and also in Sweden. And so we meet every year. We meet annually. We meet 1 year in Scandinavia, 1 year in Australia. We also have colleagues in the Netherlands as well. And we're doing mainly in education, but there's sort of some connected, if you like, theorists who are working in areas like allied health and that sort of thing. So no, that's a big group. There's probably maybe 60, 70 people, and we also run a doctoral school, which kind of aligns with the research network meeting, and that's a really good feeding ground to bring students into the kind of thinking about practice and practice theory. So it's a lot of fun. I feel very connected.
And a lot of people, that means you could perhaps persuade to get on the map. But anyhow, before we go on to that, maybe you could tell us where you would like us to go next on our travels. Is there somebody else who maybe you've never met, or maybe you have met before, who's on the map, or you'd just like to hear from them? We can go anywhere.
Yes. It has to be someone who's currently in this practice group, is it? Is that right? That's the idea?
No, it's anybody you think, anybody you'd like to meet.
Okay.
Or
I
you know already.
Okay. There is someone that I think I know that person very well, so maybe that's not such a good person to pick.
No, that's fine.
Okay. Yep. So I would nominate Doris Santos, and Doris is a wonderful Colombian researcher and colleague of mine who's been doing terrific work in the area of praxis, Praxis, and practice, and she brings a really fascinating kind of critical emancipatory understanding of practice and praxis, and she's very much imbued in the kind of more Latin American Freirean and Fowles Border notions of critical action research. She's brilliant, and she's used Hannah Arendt as well, very interestingly, in her work. So I don't know if she would name herself a practice theorist, but I think her dialogue with practice architecture theory has been enormously helpful. She's very refreshing to talk to and a great intellectual.
Excellent, thanks very much. So one last thing before we go, Jane. We asked you to bring or give us a souvenir to take on our travels. So do you have anything for us?
Yes. Do you literally want a souvenir, or can I show you a photo?
You can show us a photo, and then we'll use the photo later. Okay.
Are you able to see that?
It's your picture.
Yeah, it's from the back. It's the picture in the background, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I wanted to show you that. So this is a painting by an Indigenous artist. He's a wonderful artist who now lives up in the northern part of Australia. But that painting is a painting that he did down in an area that's probably about 100 kilometres from where I live. And if you look carefully, and you might be able to see it in the actual office, but you can certainly see it here. You can see that there's a very long line in the middle, and then there's the two shorter lines. So the Indigenous painting is extremely symbolic, and so the long line is himself, and the two shorter lines are his two sons. And he took his two boys to an area that's very special to him as an Indigenous person. It's a desert area, and it's where they have what they call their dreaming, their way of understanding the world, which is a sort of cosmology, if you like, of Indigenous peoples in Australia. And he took them to this place. They did a lot of hunting, they did a lot of traveling around, moving around, and talking about the landscape and talking about the cosmology. And so that symbolism in the middle there is himself and his two little boys. And then you can see the colours, which are very much like desert colours. So I love that painting. To me, it's very special. And it is a local Victorian person, Indigenous person from down here who now lives elsewhere. So I wanted to share that with you because I think that's a particularly nice souvenir from my country.
Great. I think it'll fit on the boat. Would you think we've got enough room, Captain?
Yeah, I think we've only got one other piece of art, if I remember correctly. I think
Okay.
So this is good. This is good. I think I'll have it in my cabin, actually. I quite like it. So
That's the Captain for you. Well, thank you, Jane, very much.
That's a pleasure,
Thanks,
Elizabeth.
Jane.
It's been a great joy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.